Honkai Star Rail Anomaly Arbitration version 3.18 guides. To summarize quickly, you probably want to do the 3 knights in the order of 1, 3, 2. Knight 1 is either the easiest or the hardest, even with only elite enemies. It has a ridiculous amount of HP, and the enemies itself is like a damage check. Knight 2 seems like the easiest, with a crit damage reduction debuff, previously used to shield dot, now presumably super break or break. The combo of the annoying lion and Pegasus is not as annoying as the Mentares in 3.6, and Swarm Boss is significantly easier. Knight 3 seemed harder than Knight 2, with both debuffs from Knight 1 and 2 in 3.7, although the enemies this time does not utilize the delay buff as well as Hule and the Snake Elite, and the Action Advance debuff, although it is more complex and more restricting on how you will be playing this. Checkmate is the weekly boss Sunday. If you don't have Firefly for this, it might be the hardest boss by far. A reminder, you don't need full stars, you get flat attack, HP, defense for your relic raisins. Most testing that I did are E0, S0 or E0, S1 units, so if you have any vertical investment, these fights will be easier than what I described. Once again, I won't test what X DPS is because it feels like a waste of time in this unholy power creep game. If you find this video useful, consider subscribing. I like making these videos. Subscribing shows that these videos are actually useful to you. We reached 600 recently, now we're aiming for 700. Thank you. With the summary done, here are some of the teams you can use to beat Anomaly Arbitration version 3.8. This script was 4 pages long. Knight 1. Allies lose 2% of their max HP when they attack. This debuff is completely ignored by 95% of the units in this game, assuming you have a healer or shields. However, these enemies are absurdly tanky, making HP inflation in MOC look like a joke. For context, the 2 Ascendants have as much HP as the bosses in Knight 2 and 3, and each one of these horses have basically double the amount of the first phase of enemies. 2 of them means 4 times the amount. There are 3 things you need to note. The first thing is that wind units won't be doing too good here, as the Ascendants have 40% wind res. The second one is that the horses advance every 4 basic skill, ult, or memo strike damage, so you can't use super break unless you have Dahlia. These horses have a skill that creates a timer. At the end of the timer, enhanced bug adds will be summoned, and the horse itself will receive less damage and weakness lock until the adds die. But if the horses take action before the timer, they will take damage and the adds will become weaker. So this fight is not 100% AoE friendly until the adds are summoned, and killing the adds do not do insane damage like the normal Swarm boss. With that, let's see our options. HP scalers completely abuse the debuff. Mighty, Jingliu, Hyacinth, Kestrus, and Evernight. The last 3 is especially good here as the horse can advance from Memo Sprite damage. Wheelchair Girl is the second best option here because she has high basic and Memo Sprite rotations, with Sunday dragging her up. Firefly and the Dahlia completely ignores the fact that the horses advance and get weakness lock and brute forces through. Can't say the same with the other break reliant units. DLT takes advantage of the advance, although the horses are not weak to physicals, so E0, S0, High Silence might not be enough. Also, Black Swan is not really good here, so you have to use Cyrene version. Anaxa E0 S1 with Cyrene and Ceridra got really close thanks to how many skills being used and spammed, but against the 40% win res, it was very difficult to 2 cycles. Finon was very clunky to use because he can use W taunt to drag the horse up, but Kaslana alone does not use skill fast enough like a team of say 4 to 8 units, so it can be very difficult to utilize the mechanics. Also, without Dan Heng's signature light cone, I find Finon dying quite fast when he gets out of his Kaslana state, so that's something to keep in mind. Hello, this is me from the future. I didn't test E2 Finon, but I think a lot have his E2, so I want to add that his E2 makes the fight way easier because he gets an additional action after the meteor, meaning free advance on the horse and free heals. And then that's all. Despite having ice weakness, Thurda was also very clunky because when the field had 5 enemies, the horse receives less damage, and when there's 2 enemies, Thurda regens like 0 energy. The same could be said with Tribi. Also, the adds are not ice weak, so I had a very hard time killing them with E0 S1. Acheron and Jingyuan could work in theory with the lightning weakness and AoE or blast damage, but again, the main problem being HP inflation. You can forget about using Fei Xiao or Yanli here because FUA doesn't advance the horse and wind res. Reminder, this stage had insane HP inflation. If MiHoYo decides to reduce the HP, then things can be different, and this would not be the hardest of 3. Knight 2. 1% of HP enemies lose means reduced crit damage by 3%. This isn't as annoying as 3.6 because the enemies are not the Manta Rays, they don't hard shield for dot or break this time, but the Lion and Pegasus is annoying as always. These 2 can disrupt your energy or stun you, and it's arguably harder than the boss itself. Praying one of them don't get Storm Ride like always. The boss is the Swarm Bug. If you decide to bring a crit DPS, A blast DPS or AoE DPS is more preferred here. Finally, you want burst damage, booming the enemies from full HP where they don't resist crit damage yet. Continuous and frequent damage would do worse over time. This is made to shield for Super Break with the introduction of the Dahlia. Firefly can even break the boss before it spawns the ads, so she's actually doing as good as Rabba even if there's no fire weakness. Boot Hero is also good here to the surprise of no one. This debuff can be ignored if you use Dot as well as it is made for them in 3.6, although the bug boss are physical, lightning, and wind resistant by 20%. E0 casters still demolish this stage thanks to quantum weakness and Cyrene. Back to brute forcing options, we got Finon E0S1 who completely ignores the first phase stun and energy mechanics and can nuke the boss and the ads from full HP. Quantum weakness also means that Archer E0S1 does pretty well as a brute forcing option, although SP management is still bad if you don't have E1. Mighty E0S0 with Hyacinth E0S1 also did pretty well with the imaginary weakness and immunity control, and his blast damage can actually kill the smaller bugs. Fei Xiao E0S1 also performed well with Cypher support because she records damage when enemies still take 100% full crit damage and dish out true damage when enemies start getting tanky. Thurda is very good against the bug boss but struggles against the Pegasus and Lion. I really want to mention Zilla here if she could kill the summons from the Lion and the bugs, but like, it's Zilla. Even with E1S1 supports, she still can't one-shot the small ads. Night 3. Remember how this debuff made Hule and the Snake the most annoying motherfuckers in existence? It's back on the Ugly Bastard now, and with the Action Advanced debuff on top. However, the enemies on this stage mostly do single target attacks, they don't have insane AoE counters like the Snake, and the Ugly Bastard don't move as fast as Hule. Although that is not true after 5 attacks, forcing you to do some counting. With the Gorilla and the Ugly Bastard, shields are almost mandatory here, making HP consumers perform much worse than those who uses shield. But spoilers, you can still clear this if you have Evernight or Cyrene, but like, you should really be using this team in Night 1. Also, you want a bit of AoE or blast damage to kill the ads from the boss. Killing one of them or having a shield while being hit is 1/8 of the boss's break bar. Also, this boss has a 50% damage reduction while his weakness is not broken, so bringing no physical, ice, or imaginary makes this almost impossible. When this boss is broken, it also takes 20% of its max HP and an additional 50% damage taken, so your strategy is right after this bastard advance, resetting the tally, you break and kill in preferably less than 6 attacks as well. If you time this incorrectly, you'll break and deal 1 instance of damage, and the boss advances again, getting his 50% damage reduction. This was made to shield for shielders. Dan Hung PT and Finon ignores the delay debuff, and Castellana could AoE kill all the smaller ads, breaking the boss super fast. If you don't have the Dahlia to ignore the weakness bar altogether, you can forget about using Super Break here, as both debuffs will not be helping. Also, if you're gonna use Break in the first place, you're better off using them in Stage 2. Outside of Super Break, Ranmei is pretty good here, being able to delay the boss for a bit for a bigger killing window if the other supports are not available to you. DLT benefits from the action advance, but gets screwed over a bit by the delay, but still doable thanks to the physical weakness. Mighty E0 with Cyrene, giving him free attacks for when the boss is broken, barely clears. The same could be said for Anaxa, who attacks 4 times in a row in 0 action value thanks to Cyrene and Ceridra, although you're not gonna have fun counting the amount of attacks you used. Fei Xiao barely clears because her ult ignores weaknesses. Acheron didn't feel good because her team doesn't break the boss fast enough, and also because there's no good Nihility that has the corresponding weakness except for Sir Wolf's Implant. There's also no way to generate stacks and not dealing damage at the same time and advancing the enemies because Jiaoju requires the boss to move and the other debuffers requires 1 hit to apply the debuff. Same problem also with Yunli, who wants the boss to move to deal big damage. I also didn't bother with options that aren't ice, physical, or imaginary, so let me know if there's a carry that I missed. Currently, this is not harder than Night 1 thanks to HP inflation, but you should keep in mind the ice, physical, imaginary, and shield restrictions. For Checkmate, Sunday, once again, you don't really need to care, 1 star for the dice. Although, this boss is really harder than LYGUS and Aquilla if you don't have Super Break. The first buff, allies break effect increased by 60%, when toughness is reduced to 0, increased break damage taken by 15% up to 4 times. This is for Super Break and Break. The second buff increases all allies attacked by 40%, additionally stackable 20% every time Sunday gets railed. This is for anyone who implants their own weaknesses or fire, lightning, and imaginary teams. The third buff increases damage by 40%, Allies dealing damage will implant the corresponding weaknesses. This is for everyone that doesn't meet the conditions above. This boss is not easy. It's not as hard as Aquilla mechanic wise, but it's definitely tankier if you do things wrong. You'll do way better with AoE units as there's 5 enemies linked in health on the field. The boss receives 45% less damage if you break him, then the reduction goes down by 15% each time. This count resets every phase. At the start of battle, all allies' energy is reduced by 50%, and energy regeneration outside their turn is reduced by 50% for 2 turns. Now this is very debilitating. You have to waste another turn on most units to get them fully going. Every time Sunday takes damage, reduces the crit damage he takes by 4% up to 40%. This cannot be accumulated while Sunday is broken, and the count resets after he's broken. The debuffs this time has a lot of crit damage and damage mitigation, only useful for the break archetype. Basically 2 of these debuffs require you to have break, and the energy debuff gives you a massive slow start, unless you don't use energy like Finon or Acheron, but crit damage is still reduced. Overall, it's not a fun boss. It's more restricting and frustrating than the 2 last boss. And that's all for version 3.8's Anomaly Arbitration. Let me know if you think I missed a team somewhere that could be used in this phase. Subscribe, we're almost at 1K subscribers. Thank you.